the program. We are joined today by Wang, a professor and dean at Renmin University in China, and who is also the deputy dean of the Silk Road School. So we've spoken before on this program, of course, and I'm very happy to have you back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Vincent. I'm so happy to see you again.
Likewise. So what I wanted to discuss with you today was the developing relations between China and India. So in East Asia, these are, of course, the two massive Eurasian giants, and the assumption is all often that if we can get the big pieces to fit, to work out, then the smaller pieces will fall in line more easily if we can get the big things. But well, I guess just as a starting topic, what are the main challenges in terms of harmonizing the interests of China and India as the foundation of this Eurasian setting?
This is a very good question, and also the very important issues in China, and maybe as well as in India. Actually, I've been to India 3 times and have personally witnessed its rapid rise. Now, India become the world fifth largest economy. But however, India remains significantly weaker than China. India's GDP is only about 20% of China's. India's electricity generation is only 18% of China's. And India's industrial output is only about 10% of China's. And the infrastructure gap between India and China is even greater. For example, China has 50,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, while India has none. So the two countries have also a population of 1.4 billion. But as we all know that, as you mentioned, that in the 1980s, China and India were roughly equal in strength. But the problem is that 40 years later, why has China widened the gap? I believe, because before I was talking about the competition and difficulty between India and China relationship, I have to share with you 3 reasons about why China wider the gap between China and India. I think first, China has a strong government and a strong political party leadership, ensuring strategic planning and policy implementation. In contrast, India has more diverse political parties and relatively low administrative efficiency. Second, China's domestic governance has improved. So, for example, China has strengthened the national identity of its 1.4 billion people, enhanced urban security, improved the infrastructure, and equalized social services, made low carbon environment, anti-corruption, and implement effective industrial policy, health protection, achieved universal education, and eradicated poverty. In contrast, in contrast, India is much worse in these regards. Third point, China's level of openness to the outside world is improving. China is a major magnet for foreign investment, and the China business environment continues to be improved. Even with U.S. investment, China remain friendly. But in contrast, uh, India business environment remains relatively poor. So when we are talking about the difficulties uh, between China and India, or the future of India rise, so we have to compare nowadays the gap between India and China. But even that, these gaps do not mean a denial of India rise. On the contrary, I think that not even nowadays, many India and the China scholars are paying attention to the China's rise and the gap between India and China, or the competition between China and India. So I think even that I admit that India has a very huge potential. And for example, India has a young population and a consumer market with considerable potential. So I think if India can continue to advance domestic reforms, adopt open policies, improve its business environment, and eliminate absolute poverty among its 200 million people and its illiteracy rate of around 30%, I believe India's future is promising. So my prediction is that by 2050, the world's four most powerful country will be China, United States, Russia, and India. How about Europe? I think if Europe can better promote integration and address immigration issues, perhaps I think Europe will be sure to be among the top 5. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, well, it's a good point because the parity. I think that's whenever you talk to people in India, it seems that this is what underpins a lot of the concern that the all parity, which well more or less there in the late 70s, early 80s, is all gone now with the rise of China, and but I did want to touch also on the Chinese model, because if we discuss the extent to which India can emulate China, it's also worth noting that China itself is changing a lot. I think the Chinese economy today, it's very, very different from what we saw only a decade ago. But I guess in many ways, the Chinese began, much like the other Asian tigers, doing the very first easy manufacturing, and then they climbed up the value chains and now beginning to take leadership in key technologies. But how do you see the most recent developments within this evolution of the Chinese economy, the direction it's taking?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important question, and also it's a very crucial issue because if you study China's change in the past decade, you can find that China's huge transformation. So this huge transformation is a key focus of my research, and also it's a key characteristics of the West migrant of China. Actually, next month I will invite politicians, scholars, and media professionals from the United States and several European countries to China for in-depth research and highly significant strategic dialogue. Maybe next year I'd like to invite you, Professor Vincent, to China for in-depth research. I think we want to intend to allow the world to discover the China transformation, especially in the past decade. Let me show you about the very important six struggle over the past decade that have been overlooked by the West. First is the anti-pollution struggle. As you may know, over the past decade, China has eliminated absolute poverty for 100 million people, achieving the zero poverty goal of the United Nations SDG 2030, 10 years ahead of the schedule. Furthermore, through the digital economy and the AI technology in the past 1 decade, China is promoting equal access to social services and build a convenient and efficient society for shared prosperity. For example, these include virtual payment, no cash payments in China. You know, even for me, I have many months or many years when I pay, without cash in China. And also the convenient transportation, right? And also the lower crime cities. In China, the city are very, very safe. Anyone who has visited China, they will recognize that life in Chinese city is now more convenient than most of the city in West. So the second is anti-corruption struggle. Over the past decade, at least 5 million 5 million Chinese officials have been punished for corruption. Yes, 5 million. Uh, 5 million Chinese officials have been punished for corruption with warnings, demotions, imprisonment, and even the death penalty. Yes, death penalty. So currently, China is undoubtedly the country with the strictest oversight for the officials in the world. Because we all know that corruption is a chronic human scourge. China still faces enormous challenges in anti-corruption. But to be honestly, compared to the institutionalized corruption faced by the Western government, China now has made far greater efforts to against the corruption. The third is anti-pollution struggle. 10 years ago, Chinese city still suffer from severe smog, soil pollution, and water pollution. But now, the ecology has transferred dramatically. Ecological civilization and low carbon development now have become the China national policy. China has become the best major economy in implement the Paris Climate Agreement. The fourth, there's an anti-blockade struggle. For a decade, the US has imposed a technological blockade and trade sanctions on China. In response, China has strengthened scientific and technological innovation and caught up with the fourth industrial revolution. So currently, China and the US have become the world's most powerful country in AI, surpassing establishment development countries like Europe and Japan. Fifth, there's anti-crisis. Over the past decade, China has addressed the housing bubble, resolved the local debt, cleaned up the capital market, and promoted high quality development. So now the Chinese economy is healthier than before. In contrast, more people now are discussing the possibility of the financial crisis in the United States. Sixth, final point, there is an anti-hegemony struggle. So over the past decade, China has considered, consistently opposed the U.S. hegemony, proposed the Belt and Road Initiative, actively participated in global governance, reformed the international system, and committed itself to build a community with a shared future for mankind that enjoying lasting peace, universal security, common prosperity, openness, inclusive, and a clean and beautiful world. This is our target. So, uh, let me share you the six anti poverty, anti pollution, anti corruption, anti blockade, anti crisis, and anti hegemony. So these six anti struggle. So I think very obvious that is the past decade has very obvious demonstrated that China is not the Soviet Union of the 1940s or the Japan of the 1980s. China's rise is no longer a trade of US hegemony. None does it aspire to overthrow the existing international order or start a new Cold War. Instead, it aspires to be a reformer, builder, and contributor of the international system. Of course, some people in the past a few years, they predict that China will be decline or China will be collapse. No, I don't think so. China will not collapse or decline, but will instead grow stronger, more civilized, and more sustainable. Even we still face a lot of difficulties, but I feel full confidence on China's future.
Well, I wanted to circle a bit about back to the issue of the relations between China and India, though, because well, I always make the point that if you would have a hegemonic power like the United States who would want to counter China, there's always the opportunity of appealing to India's concerns about being about the growing disparity between China and India in terms of power. But it does appear that the United States, it's still, while it's become recognizing that the world is becoming more multipolar, they haven't given up on the ambitions to restore the unipolar system. And well, one of their ways to do it is to make countries around the world reduce their economic ties to China and then link themselves more exclusively to the United States. I would say that this has been very successful with the Europeans. That is, Europe has severed their economic ties with Russia. We see now recently they put the snapback sanctions on Iran on very, I would say, fraudulent basis, given that they were talking about working with the IAEA. And there's also now pressure for the Europeans to also cut ties with China. Indeed, the Europeans are now discussing how many sanctions should we put on China to make Mr. Trump happy. And well, the result is very predictable. It's always, as you see in Europe, there will be even more dependence on the United States. And this is something that the Americans can exploit. But India, they didn't go down this path, it seems. Instead, they rejected the US pressure, demand that they cut ties with both the Russians and the Chinese, and instead they're now diversifying their economic dependencies. I guess this was very open to the whole world when Modi, after 7 years, boarded a flight to China for the SCO meeting. And again, China and India still have many problems to iron out in their relationship. But what are the main impediments, though, to improve China-India ties? Or again, well, one can't solve all problems, but what do you think is realistic to achieve over the next few years?
Yeah. Before I answer the India-China relationship, I have to give you a response about the U.S. and China relationship. I have to tell you a very important secret. Or my research result. Because actually, in the first half of 2025, I mean this year, China foreign trade grew by 2.9%, exceeding the average international trade growth rate of 1.7%. So from this point, the U.S. strategy, now you mentioned the U.S. strategy of forcing countries around the world to reduce their economic tie with China. I think this strategy has failed, right? Because China's foreign strategy is still grown up much faster than the average international trade growth trade rate, right? But instead, I have to tell you is that that China now is pursuing a de-Americanization strategy. This is very important, but a lot of Western media overlook this point. These include 5 key points. First, de-Americanization of trade. But before 2018, China's export to the U.S. amounted for about 20% of China's total exports. In the first 8 months of 2025, this figure dropped to 9%. Meanwhile, China exports have continued to grow annually, maintain its position as the world's largest exporter. Second, de-Americanization of military and technological development. I don't know whether you watched the Tiananmen Square military parade in the early September. All Chinese military weapons in the parade are 100% domestically produced, and many are more advanced than those of the United States. Third, de-Americanization of ideology. Currently, China is pursuing an independent intellectual system. And we, scholars, professors in China, have a clear understanding of so-called American concept, such as democracy or freedom or the rule of law and human rights, so-called American characteristics. And the China Academy now, more and more Chinese professors now is increasingly convinced of the hypocrisy of American so-called universal value. Fourth, the deep Americanization of high technology. So currently, China has our own path to promote innovation in AI. For example, a company like DeepSeek, Robotic, and Huawei, right, are all pursue independent innovation. Fifth, the de-Americanization of education. So 10 years ago, I don't know whether you know about 300,000 Chinese young students went to the United States annually. And now the number is less than 100,000. So over the past decade, China's ties with a country in the global south have strengthened. As you may know, China-Africa relations, China-Latin American relations, China-Southeast Asia relations, China-Euro-Asia relations, China-Middle East relations have all reached historical high levels. So at the same time, the United States has withdrawn from many international organizations, including WHO, the Paris Agreement, and the UNESCO. So from this point, it is not China that is being isolated by the United States, but the United States that is being isolated by the world. This is a very important phenomenon. So as far you mentioned the China-India relationship, I believe that because since India Prime Minister Modi attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, China, in early September of this year, and China-India relationship now have improved. So both of us, both China and India, are great civilization and possess sufficient wisdom to handle the difficulties and challenges we face. The potential for bilateral relationship between China and India is enormous and will not be hidden by the current border dispute. So also, I think the United States cannot be provoke or separate the India and China relationship improvement. Because more and more scholars from China and India now we are still together. We are talking about the dispute between the two countries, and so we have more and more confidence in the bilateral relationship improvement. So I think, let me imagine, cooperation between the two countries with a population of nearly 3 billion. I think it's bound to change the world. So I think nowadays, how to push the international system reform, how to change the world better and better, gradually become the common sense between the India and China's academy. So this is the real change between our two countries.
It's well, something appears to be changing, and it's, I guess it's not just India. We see similar trends from Japan or South Korea. The recognition that the world is fundamentally changing and starting to reconsider some of the commitments to the U.S. alliance system, as that puts them always in greater tensions with China and undermines the possibility of finding some other solutions where they could have some win-win outcomes. But I just my last question though, I wanted to ask, what do you see the roles of BRICS as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in terms of, I guess, reorganizing not just the economic system, but also on a wider framework? How does it reorganize relations between civilizations? Because if we only look at the economic aspect, it is interesting that most states would like to have the opportunity to diversify. That is, not only to be dependent on one center of power for technology or finance or transportation corridors. So I think the misperception of China, often in the West at least, is one thinks that the alternative to US dominated world is a Chinese dominated world. But again, that's not really why. That's not really what the Chinese are proposing. Also, not what these institutions are facilitating. It seems to be opposing the unipolar or hegemonic system with one of multipolarity. Again, how does this work out in terms of economics as well as, I guess, the relationship between civilizations?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dingson. I think you are very, very smart. Because you notice such a very tiny or even simultaneous very huge change from the global south. Because nowadays, to the honestly, in the Western academy, very few scholars they notice the huge change launched by the BRICS or Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So actually, in May of this year, I given a speech at BRICS Plus pre-summit held in Brazil, and outlining the role of the BRICS mechanism in advising civilization. I mentioned the three key points in the speech gathered considerable attention. Because first is BRICS mechanism, break unipolar hegemony and promote the fundamental adjustment in the global power structure. Second, innovating dialogue among civilization, striving to transcend the center and periphery prototype of action. Third, reshaping development ethic and fully demonstrating the diversity of paths to modernization. Because as we all know that nowadays more and more countries they rise up. If you go to the Africa, you can see the rise of Ethiopia, the rise of Nigeria, the rise of Tanzania, the rise of South Africa. If you go to the Latin America, you can see the rise of the Brazil, and if you go to the ASEAN countries, you can see the rise of Indonesia, the rise of Malaysia, right? They are all in the rising path of the modernization. So that's why in September of this year, I mean this month, the early of this month, Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit was held in Tianjin, China. As I mentioned, President Xi Jinping proposed the Global Governance Initiative. This is China's fourth global initiative, following the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. So this initiative once again demonstrates, as I mentioned, that China is not seeking an international revolution or establishing a new hegemony. So in China, we dislike hegemony. The word we dislike is hegemony, and we don't want to push the international revolution, but rather working with emerging economy to promote a better world, Because we know there are so many emerging economy. Not only one country rise up. We found there are many countries rising up simultaneously. So from this perspective, you mentioned a lot the BRICS or the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Both of these mechanisms are in fact a quite civilizational revolution. These two major mechanisms are addressing a realism dilemma in international relations theory that has preached the West for 500 years. That is the question, very, very important, because when we are studying the international relations theory, we will face such a dilemma, such a question. That is, what should be done when one or more countries rise up? So should there be war? Should there be hegemony? Should there be revolution? No. now the countries like China or Brazil are all thinking about improving cooperation, supporting multilateralism, promoting dialogue among civilization, building strategic trust, and promoting reform of the international system. So this is a move beyond the civilizational model dominated by the Western civilization for the past 500 years, and towards a new model or paradigm of the human civilization. So this is what I focus on or I research. So, but I admit, of course, the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization still face many difficulties. But we have to know, always we have the difficulties. Actually, these difficulties and the differences are precisely the driving force for progress. So as the emerging economy become increasingly united and powerful, and we remain confident that the world of the future will become a better place. So that's why you mentioned that in not only this July in Brazil, the BRICS Plus Summit, or this September in Tianjin, China, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. All the emerging country, they feel modest. They just want to unite it, and also they hurry for the peaceful prosperity. They hurry for the multilateralism. So that's why I think that in the future, the better world will not be created by the West, but led by the emerging economy. So how about you will mention, how about the United States? I think uh, maybe United States, the strength, I mean, especially the economy strengthen, the financial strengthen, the innovation strengthen, is still very powerful. But we have to say, the soft power of United States is declining very, very quickly. And also the hegemonic system of United States is declining now. So that's why there's a reality. So how's about the other emerging economy do in the future? I think that is united and hurry for the better world, multilateralism, and we try to build a better future. That's my observation.
Yeah. Well, when the Cold War came to an end in Europe, they people like George Kennan, the legendary American diplomat, he made the point that it was so depressing to see when in the new world all the opportunities were there to create a vastly different kind of world, and he was so dismayed that the only political imagination he found among his own political class was the idea of expanding zero-sum military blocks, weakening rivals, and going back to this kind of mentality. So I tend to be very optimistic and hopeful that a more benign multipolar international system can emerge based on this positive sum solution. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Professor Dingson. I look forward seeing you again in person, not only in the other country but also in China. Maybe next year we like invite you in China.
I'll be in Wuhan at the university there in November, so maybe.
Really? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can go to Beijing. I like to invite deliver a speech in our university. Okay, and maybe I can organize some event for you inclusively.
Wonderful. I look forward to it then. Thank you.
Yes.